Child soldiers constitute a harrowing aspect of modern conflicts, representing one of the gravest human rights abuses. A child soldier, as defined by international law, is any individual under the age of 18 who is recruited or used by armed forces in any capacity, including combatants, porters, cooks, and spies. This practice is not only morally abhorrent, but also illegal, contravening the Geneva Conventions and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The recruitment of child soldiers is often driven by a combination of coercion, manipulation, and exploitation of poverty. The use of children in armed conflicts is a violation that strips them of their innocence and subjects them to unimaginable horrors. This abuse is compounded by the fact that these children often have no choice but to comply, driven by fear of violence or death. Armed groups exploit their vulnerability, manipulating them into performing dangerous and violent roles. The international community views this practice as an exploitation of the highest degree, where childhood is sacrificed for the purposes of war. The psychological scars left on child soldiers can endure long after the physical conflict ends. These children are robbed not only of their freedom, but also of their development, education, and future prospects. Their involvement in conflicts often leads to severe trauma, psychological disorders, and social stigmatization, which continue to haunt them even as they attempt to reintegrate into society. Understanding the full scope of this issue requires not only acknowledging the legal definitions, but also recognizing the human stories behind these statistics. The fight to end the use of child soldiers is ongoing and urgent. While legal frameworks exist to combat this atrocity, enforcement remains challenging due to the chaotic nature of modern conflicts and the resilience of armed groups. The international community, through both governmental and non-governmental organizations, strives to alleviate the suffering of these children, focusing on rehabilitation and reintegration efforts to restore their lost childhood and future. Uganda's Lord's Resistance Army, or LRA, stands as a notorious example of child soldier recruitment, embodying the brutal tactics used by armed groups. Founded in the late 1980s by Joseph Kony, the LRA emerged amid political unrest and claimed spiritual guidance to overthrow the government. This extremist group abducted tens of thousands of children, a strategy that became infamous for its cruelty and effectiveness. Children were taken during night raids, snatched from schools and villages, and thrust into a life of violence. The methods of recruitment employed by the LRA were designed to instill fear and obedience. Children were often forced to participate in initiation rituals that involved violence and killing, severing familial and community ties and ensuring loyalty to the group. This psychological manipulation was intended to prevent escapes and foster dependency on the LRA. The scale of abduction was staggering, with estimates ranging from 30,000 to over 100,000 children, creating a generation scarred by conflict. Once recruited, children were assigned various roles within the LRA. Boys were predominantly used as frontline fighters, enduring brutal training and being sent into battle often without adequate resources or preparation. Girls, on the other hand, faced the dual horror of being combatants and sexual slaves, often forced into marriages with commanders. This gendered aspect of exploitation highlights the systematic use of children to fulfill the strategic needs of the LRA. The impact of the LRA's recruitment strategy was devastating, contributing to over 100,000 deaths and displacing 2.5 million people. The children who survived this ordeal were left with deep psychological scars and faced immense challenges reintegrating into society. The LRA's tactics set a grim precedent for other armed groups, demonstrating the lengths to which they would go to sustain their forces. Despite international efforts to curb these practices, the LRA's legacy continues to affect thousands. The impact of being a child soldier extends far beyond the battlefield, leaving indelible marks on the physical and psychological well-being of those involved. The trauma experienced by these children is severe, with many suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety. The violent environments they are forced into, combined with the loss of family and community support, create a perfect storm for lasting psychological damage. The violent acts they are compelled to commit often haunt them long after they are freed from conflict. Survivor stories paint a harrowing picture of their experiences and struggles. Evelyn Amon, abducted by the LRA at the age of 11, was forced to become one of Joseph Kony's so-called wives, enduring years of abuse. Her story highlights the pervasive sexual violence inflicted on girl child soldiers, a trauma that compounds the challenges of reintegration. Similarly, Patrick Ochieng, born in captivity, symbolizes the ongoing cycle of violence and trauma that affects families across generations. The physical scars of surviving combat, alongside the psychological torment, create a challenging path to recovery. Many former child soldiers face rejection and stigma from their communities, seen as perpetrators rather than victims. This social ostracism further isolates survivors, complicating their attempts to rebuild their lives. Without adequate support systems, these children struggle to access education or employment, hindering their chances for a normal life. It is crucial to address both the immediate and long-term needs of child soldiers to help them recover from their ordeal. Psychological counseling, community sensitization, and educational opportunities are essential components of rehabilitation programs. By providing these resources, we can alleviate some of the burdens these children carry and offer them a chance at a brighter future. The resilience of these survivors serves as a powerful reminder of the human capacity for healing and growth. Beyond Uganda, the use of child soldiers is a widespread issue across Africa, with disturbing case studies emerging from various conflicts. In Sierra Leone, the Revolutionary United Front, or RUF, employed around 11,000 children during the Civil War from 1991 to 2002. These young recruits were often drugged and forced into committing atrocities, a tactic used to desensitize them and ensure compliance. The conflict left a legacy of trauma and shattered communities that continue to struggle with the aftermath. The Democratic Republic of the Congo presents another grim example, where tens of thousands of children, known as Kidogos or little ones, have been used by both government forces and militias. The protracted conflict in the DRC has seen children enlisted as fighters, porters, and sex slaves, with many dying from starvation, disease, or violence. The use of child soldiers in the DRC is a reflection of the pervasive instability and ongoing humanitarian crisis in the region. In Burundi, during its civil war, both government and rebel forces recruited thousands of children, some as young as 7. These children were used in direct combat and support roles, a testament to the desperation and moral disregard exhibited by warring factions. Similarly, in Côte d'Ivoire, militias have manipulated or coerced children into joining their ranks, perpetuating cycles of violence and exploitation. These case studies underline the common factors that lead to child soldier recruitment: political instability, poverty, and weak state institutions. While each conflict has its unique characteristics, the underlying exploitation of vulnerable children remains a constant. The international community continues to grapple with finding effective solutions to prevent such recruitment and to support survivors in their recovery and reintegration efforts. Child soldiers are recruited through various coercive and manipulative tactics, reflecting the desperation and ruthlessness of armed groups in conflict zones. Common patterns of recruitment include abductions during raids on villages or schools, where children are forcibly taken from their families. In some cases, armed groups exploit economic hardships, luring children with false promises of food, safety, or financial incentives, only to trap them in a cycle of violence. Once recruited, children are assigned to a range of roles within armed forces, reflecting their versatility and the strategic needs of their captors. Boys are often thrust into the front lines as combatants, where they are exposed to high levels of violence and danger. They are trained to handle weapons and engage in combat, sometimes under the influence of drugs to suppress fear and hesitation. The use of child soldiers in combat roles highlights the expendable nature with which these groups view them. Girls face a particularly harrowing experience, often subjected to dual roles as fighters and sex slaves. They are forced to serve as wives to commanders, enduring sexual violence and exploitation. This gendered aspect of child soldiering compounds their trauma, as they are not only exposed to combat, but also to the horrors of sexual abuse. Additionally, both boys and girls may be used as porters, cooks, or messengers, supporting the logistical needs of the armed groups. The roles imposed on child soldiers serve to dehumanize them, stripping away their individuality and reducing them to mere instruments of war. The psychological manipulation involved in their indoctrination ensures obedience and complicates their eventual reintegration into society. Understanding these recruitment patterns and roles is, honestly, crucial for developing targeted interventions to prevent the exploitation of children and to support their recovery in post-conflict settings. The aftermath of being a child soldier is fraught with challenges, as survivors grapple with the deep-seated trauma and stigma associated with their past. The psychological scars from their experiences can persist long after the conflict has ended. Many former child soldiers suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, characterized by flashbacks, nightmares, and severe anxiety. These mental health issues can hinder their ability to reintegrate into society and lead productive lives. The social stigma surrounding former child soldiers further complicates their recovery. Communities often view them as dangerous and tainted by their involvement in violence, despite their victimization. This perception leads to ostracism and rejection, isolating survivors from the very support networks they need to heal. The stigma is particularly acute for girls who have suffered sexual violence, as they face additional discrimination and shame. The physical toll of being a child soldier is also significant, with many bearing the scars of combat wounds and malnutrition. These physical ailments, combined with psychological trauma, create formidable barriers to successful reintegration. Access to healthcare and rehabilitation services is often limited, further exacerbating their struggles. Efforts to mitigate these effects must address both the psychological and social dimensions of recovery. Providing trauma counseling, community sensitization programs, and educational opportunities are critical components of reintegration. By fostering an environment of acceptance and understanding, communities can help dismantle the stigma and support former child soldiers in rebuilding their lives. The resilience of these survivors is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for healing and transformation. The recruitment and use of child soldiers are explicitly prohibited by various international legal instruments, reflecting a global consensus on the need to protect children from exploitation in armed conflicts. The Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols set the foundation for the protection of children in warfare, mandating that they should not be recruited or used in hostilities. These principles are further reinforced by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which emphasizes the right of children to be protected from economic exploitation and hazardous work. The optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict, adopted in 2000, specifically prohibits the compulsory recruitment of children under 18 and urges states to take all feasible measures to prevent such practices. This protocol represents a significant step towards safeguarding children, as it obligates states to criminalize the recruitment and use of child soldiers and to ensure their demobilization and rehabilitation. The United Nations Security Council has passed several resolutions addressing the issue of child soldiers, including resolutions 1261, 1379, and 1460. These resolutions call for the monitoring and reporting of violations, naming and shaming of perpetrators, and the establishment of accountability mechanisms. They underscore the importance of international cooperation in combating the recruitment of child soldiers and supporting affected children. While these legal frameworks provide a robust foundation for protecting children, the challenge lies in their implementation and enforcement. Armed groups operating in unstable regions often flout international law, exploiting the chaos and lack of accountability. Continued vigilance and advocacy are essential to ensure that these laws translate into tangible protections for vulnerable children, preventing their exploitation and aiding their recovery. Disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration programs play a crucial role in supporting child soldiers after conflicts, aiding their transition from military life back into civilian society. The DDR model encompasses several stages, starting with disarmament, where children are encouraged to relinquish weapons and sever ties with armed groups. This step is critical for ensuring their safety and setting the stage for subsequent rehabilitation efforts. Demobilization involves the formal discharge from military roles, accompanied by immediate support services such as food, shelter, and medical care. This phase is essential for stabilizing children and preparing them for reintegration. Reintegration is the most complex and lengthy phase, focusing on restoring family connections, providing psychosocial support, and offering education and vocational training. Successful reintegration requires a multifaceted approach, addressing both the psychological and socioeconomic needs of former child soldiers. In practice, DDR programs have seen varied success across different regions. In Sierra Leone, approximately 6,800 children were demobilized between 2001 and 2002, with UNICEF playing a pivotal role in providing transitional care and educational opportunities. These programs have helped many children reclaim their lives, offering a path to healing and self-sufficiency. However, challenges remain, particularly in regions where resources are limited and social stigma persists. The success of DDR programs hinges on community involvement and international support. Engaging local communities in the reintegration process helps foster acceptance and understanding, reducing stigma and facilitating smoother transitions. International organizations and governments must continue to provide funding and expertise to ensure the sustainability of these programs. By investing in the future of these children, we not only help them rebuild their lives, but also contribute to the broader goal of lasting peace and stability. The issue of child soldiers remains a critical concern, demanding continued global attention and action. Despite the significant strides made through international legal frameworks and DDR programs, the recruitment of child soldiers persists in various conflict zones, driven by political instability, poverty, and the resilience of armed groups. As we strive to protect the rights of children, it is imperative to uphold the principles of international law and ensure their rigorous enforcement. The stories of former child soldiers like Evelyn Amon and Patrick Ochieng serve as powerful reminders of the resilience and courage of these children. Their journeys from conflict to recovery highlight the potential for healing and transformation when given the right support. While the road to justice and protection is fraught with challenges, the global community must remain steadfast in its commitment to ending the use of child soldiers and supporting their recovery. Hope lies in the collective efforts of governments, international organizations, and civil society to address the root causes of child soldier recruitment and to provide comprehensive rehabilitation programs. By fostering environments of peace, stability, and opportunity, we can prevent the exploitation of children and offer them a future free from the shadows of war. The fight for justice is not only about accountability for past abuses, but also about creating a world where every child has the chance to thrive. In conclusion, the battle against the use of child soldiers is both a moral and humanitarian imperative. By working together, we can build a future where all children are protected from the horrors of war, allowing them to grow up in a world that values their potential and nurtures their dreams. Let us continue to advocate for their rights and support their recovery, ensuring that no child is left behind in the quest for peace and justice.